Welcome, everybody. Nice to see so many of you come out and, well, stay in and join tonight for this webinar. We're really excited to have Nick Januchis back to do this presentation, his third year in a row doing this on behalf of 14ers.com. So thank you for joining. A couple things about Nick. First and foremost, he is such an asset to the 14er community. He's been doing this education for many, many years in many formats, many places. And so we're really glad to have him in this online format yet again. But he's also a longtime volunteer with the Colorado 14ers Initiative, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. But just so you know a little bit about the experience of the person who's going to be giving you a wealth of knowledge tonight. Nick has done over 150 summits, I believe, 14ers and across all seasons. So he's quite experienced in that regard. Both, regular hiking, but also has some ski descents under his belt. So yeah, he has a really strong safety mindset, and I've never known him to give bad advice. I'm really biased, but that's my honest opinion. But that's who Nick is, and we're really happy to have him back again on behalf of the 14ers.com community. So Nick, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Can you guys see some slides?
Yes,
Nope.
sir.
Cool. Well, this is Introduction to Hiking and Climbing Colorado's 14ers. Where to go, what to do, and how to stay safe doing it. So I'm gonna present for about 45 minutes of slides, and then we're gonna have an active question and answer and discussion afterwards. You guys are welcome to stick around as long as you'd like. And then this presentation will be available online afterwards. So I'm gonna start off by talking about some 14er terminology. Then we're gonna go through how to plan a hike and get ready for the mountain. We're gonna talk about trail etiquette. Mary's going to talk a little bit about leave no trace principles. Then we're going to talk about, how to plan your hike, what to do if you get into trouble, how to call search and rescue, a little bit about the 14er community, and then end with some Q&A. So hard to believe, but 18 years ago, I moved to Colorado. And one day a friend of mine said, "Do you want to go hike a 14er?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's a hike. You'll love it." And so I showed up. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I showed up in shorts and a cotton t-shirt. I didn't bother to eat breakfast that day. And, and I was like, why are we starting so early? And I went on this hike up Mount Bierstadt, somehow made it to the summit. And I thought, wow, this is really, really cool. I'd like to do this again. And so I did a lot. And out of that one experience has come an amazing series of Colorado mountaineering experiences. Everything from getting to do trail work and working on the 14ers, to climbing in winter, to skiing peaks, to climbing all the 14ers, to going out of state and climbing Mount Rainier. And so when I think back about this guy who had really no idea what he was getting himself into, I try to think about, if I take what I've learned in the last 18 years and I could go back and I could give him some advice, what would I tell him? Because this guy made a lot of mistakes along the way, but luckily didn't get into too much trouble. And so this talk is kind of the accumulation of those types of ideas. I'm trying to put you on a better path than when I first started. So let's start at the very beginning. What is a 14er? Well, a 14er is a mountain with an elevation greater than 14,000 feet and less than 15,000 feet. Colorado has 58 peaks over 14,000 feet tall. Likewise, a 13er is a peak between 13,000 and 14,000 feet. The highest peak in Colorado is Mount Elbert. It's out by Leadville. It's 14,433 feet tall. Sometimes you'll see people like try to sneak an N in there or an apostrophe. Don't do that. The correct spelling is either 14er or 14er, like that. Okay, so where are the peaks located? Well, here's Denver. This is where I'm at tonight in my home in Golden. There are you know what? I forgot to update this slide. I'm happy to say that all the peaks are now open, including Mount Lindsay, as of recently. Just a couple years ago, we had as many as 5 peaks that were closed because they had private land ownership. And there were some changes to Colorado law, and landowners were worried that if somebody got hurt on their property, that they could be sued. But now they've kind of resolved that. And so a couple of the peaks you have to sign a waiver, but all 58 peaks are open again, which is really exciting. The majority of them are on public lands, which include Forest Service, up in Rocky Mountain National Park and BLM and wilderness area. And there is one 14er, Culebra Peak, which is down here, is the southernmost peak down in the Sangres, and it is privately owned. And you have to make a reservation and pay $150 to climb that peak. But you can still climb the other 57 for free. All right, surrounding the 14ers are over 700 13ers. And so 14ers tend to get crowded. They're very popular. If you like being in the mountains and you just kind of want to be alone, you could always go check out a 13er. Right across the way is just another peak, just a little bit lower, that will have a lot less people on it and a lot more quiet. But, you know, who wants to mess with 13ers when we've got 14ers all over the place? So the 14ers are broken into a couple different mountain ranges. We have the Front Range right here near Denver. Then we have the Swatch Range, which runs from Leadville down to Salida. We have the Elks, which are out by Aspen. We have the San Juans, which are out by Telluride and Silverton. And then we have the Sangre de Cristos. So let's talk a little bit about the trails. There's a couple of different trail rating classes. The easiest trail is a Class 1 trail. And this is usually a man-made trail that's in pretty good condition, easy to follow. Here's some examples. There's a handful of 14ers that have Class 1 trails. The majority of the 14ers have Class 2, and Class 2 is kind of broken into regular Class 2 and difficult Class 2. It kind of has the widest range of difficulty. You know, the definition of Class 2 hiking is a more difficult hike that may require route finding. You may also have to occasionally put your hand down to keep your balance. And it can also include things like talus fields. So on the left here is a standard Class 2 trail. This is on Missouri, not too hard. The one in the middle is a Class 2 section of Mount Wilson, which is just a bunch of big rocks that are kind of loose and wobble around a little bit. And then on the right is this nasty Class 2 gully on Mount Sneffels, which a bunch of loose rocks and dirt. All of this is kind of considered into Class 2. When we get into Class 3 is technically considered climbing. It's defined as scrambling or unroped climbing. You must use your hands most of the time to hold the terrain or find the route. This may be caused by a combination of steepness and extreme terrain. So here's a couple examples. The peak on the left, this is Wetterhorn Peak. This is my favorite 14er. This is the Class 3 section. And then on the right is Wilson Peak. This is the Class 3 section through here. And it's important to remember that routes are rated by whatever the hardest section of the route is. So it may be like a Class 2 trail all the way up to here, and then this section is Class 3. So the entire route will then get rated as a Class 3 route. Class 4 is what a handful of the hardest 14ers are. And this is defined as being, you know, the terrain is often steep and dangerous. Falls can be fatal. Some routes can be done without rope because the terrain is stable enough. So on the left here, this is the infamous Knife Edge on Capitol. On the right is the Hourglass on Little Bear. And these are advanced, dangerous, difficult 14ers that are kind of beyond the scope of tonight's talk. But just know that they're out there. And so if we kind of rank all the 14ers based on the classification of their routes, here's a nice breakdown. So we've got 6 Class 1 peaks. We've got 20 some class 2, easier class 2. And then I like to think of class 1 and easier class 2 routes as being beginner peaks. This is a great place for you to start. I kind of break down the intermediate peaks as being these difficult class 2, and then some of the class 3s as being intermediate. And then the advanced peaks are going to be the harder class 3s and the class 4s that I mentioned. The focus of tonight's talk is going to be on these beginner and these intermediate routes, and we're going to save the advanced stuff for another night. And the important thing to notice here is if you don't, if you want to do routes that don't have high exposure or are, in the class 1, class 2 area, like you have over 30 peaks to choose from. The majority of the 14ers are class 1 or class 2. So you have lots of hiking options available. Another thing to take into consideration is the quality of rock, which can vary between mountains. On the left is what's known as the creststone conglomerate. This is creststone needle, and this is a very solid bomber rock that's fun to scramble on. And on the right is one of the maroon bells, South Maroon. And this is just a very loose, chossy rock field where literally you take a step and the rocks around you kind of go, and you take another step and everything kind of shifts a little bit, and it can be a little bit unsettling. So even though, these might be rated the same, the type of rock can make a difference. Okay, let's go over some general terms here. The first one is tree line. So when you look at Colorado mountains, what you notice is there's a lot of trees, and then you get to a certain elevation, and then after that, there's no more trees. What's going on? This is known as tree line, and basically it's the place in the elevation on a mountain where above it is just conditions are too extreme in the winter for trees to grow. And this ranges, it's a function of latitude. So in the southern part of the state, tree line's about 11.8. In the northern part of the state, it's about 11.6. But when you're in that area, that's kind of when you get the tree line. And that's significant because when you're above tree line, you're exposed to the elements. You're at risk of lightning and thunderstorms. And when you're back down below tree line, it's a little bit safer. You have some cover, you can get out of the wind, etc. Yes, I forgot. This mountain here is Wilson Peak, and Wilson Peak is famous for being on the Coors Light can. So when your mountain turns blue, that's actually Wilson Peak, which is turning blue. That's a 14er down by Telluride. Some other terms that you'll hear me talk about is a saddle is kind of the low point between two peaks. Face, we already talked about ridge, tree line, gully, etc. And then the last thing I'll mention is cairns. Cairns are these little rock sculptures that people build. If you're from Boulder, you might refer to them as art. But basically what these do is mark the trail. And a lot of times when the trail is not easy to follow, people will build cairns and kind of show you the way. So when you're like getting into some harder terrain or some hard to find routes, look out for cairns because they'll be everywhere. The other thing I'll warn about is that anybody can build one. And so just because there's a cairn there, that usually means that's the right way to go, but it's not guaranteed because anybody can build them. And then the last thing I'll mention is on the summit of the peaks, a lot of the mountains have benchmarks. This is on Mount Bierstadt. This was installed in 1955 on the summit of Mount Bierstadt, and it's still there. But some of the peaks have lost their benchmarks over the years. So if you get to the summit and you find one, it's pretty cool. Take a photo, but don't freak out if you get to the summit and there's not one because they don't all have them. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about planning your hike, how to get ready, how to figure out where to go, and then how to get there. So 14ers.com was started by Bill Middlebrook 25 years ago this month. Here's a photo of Bill on the left. And this in this month's edition of 5280 magazine, which is a Denver magazine, they actually have a story on Bill Middlebrook. called The Founder of 14ers.com Finally Shares His Story. Bill Middlebrook still gets stoked about helping people safely reaching the state's highest summits. But what will happen to the free website when its attention-shy founder is finally ready to appraise? Man, the suspense is killing me. But this is a really great article about Bill's life. Bill was a computer programmer. In the late 1990s, he developed technology to allow fax machines to send messages directly to email. And then he sold his company and retired, moved to Colorado, moved up to Breckenridge, and became a ski bum for a while, and really missed programming and really enjoyed the outdoors. So he developed this entire website, 14ers.com, that is has everything you need to know about planning your hikes, going to the mountains, and hiking 14ers. And so I'm going to give a demo here. Can you still see my screen, Mary?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So the website is 14ers.com, and it has a list of all of the 14ers. It has conditions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I'll give a quick walkthrough. So let's start by looking at what was my first 14er, Mount Bierstadt. And everything you need to know for the route is just listed right here in one place. Mount Bierstadt is about an hour west of Denver on I-70, right past Georgetown. And so if we click on routes, it will show you these are the different routes in the area. We're just going to look at the standard route, Mount Bierstadt's west slopes. And then here's kind of a breakdown of everything you need to know. So this is a class 2 hike. Bill has actually broken down the individual risk factors. So the exposure is low, the rockfall potential is ranked as moderate, route finding is low, commitment is low. This is a great peak to do as your first 14er. And like I said, it was my first one. You start pretty high at 11,600 feet. And the total gain is about 2,850 feet to the summit over a round trip of just over 7 miles. And so in the world of 14ers, kind of when you're planning a hike, one of the biggest numbers to think about is actually this total elevation gain. People tend to focus on this more than the actual mileage. If you're coming from backpacking or something else, you probably think about mileage more. But in the 14er world, we focus a lot on elevation gain. Okay. And then here's a breakdown. Here's where the trailhead is, how to get there, how far it will take you to drive there from Denver. And then there's a series of pictures that have a breakdown. So here's the view from the parking lot. Here's the route all the way up the mountain. There's the summit. And then along the way is just a number of photos and a little route description to help you get there. This is a very well-maintained trail. We've actually done trail work on this peak a couple times, and it's a pretty easy trail to follow, and there's going to be a lot of people out there on any given day. And there's also some maps. Here's a topo map. Here's a Google map of the route. Again, this is where you start. You just come up this ridge and then head back down. And then there's some other kind of fun tools. So Bierstadt is actually one of the peaks where you start, you actually go down a little bit down into this, through these willows, and then you start heading up. And so you can actually see what, at different parts of the route, what the elevation is, what your elevation profile looks like, etc. Another thing that's really helpful is peak conditions, especially this time of year when there's a lot of snow. So you can click on peak conditions, and what will happen is somebody who went out and hiked recently will give an update on what conditions are like. And so this person a week ago was in the Northwest Couloir. This was 9 days ago. Somebody did the Western Slopes, which is a standard route. There's still a lot of snow, and he says, it's in good ski condition right now, etc. So as snow melts, you know, as things start to thaw out and the snow starts to melt, you can go here and start looking for updates, and people will say like, you don't need snowshoes anymore, or no more snow is melted out, etc. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is Bill has been doing a lot of work on the site, and he's come in and he's added risk factors for all of the peaks. And so what he's done is for each peak, he's kind of broken it down. He's looked at the exposure, the rockfall, instability, the difficulty of route finding, and commitment. Commitment being like if the weather gets bad, how quickly can you get off the mountain, etc. And then he breaks them down by these categories: low, moderate, considerable, or high or extreme. And what's really cool is there's this 14ers route selection tool, and you can use this to try to find a peak that kind of matches what your comfort level is. So let's say that, you know, we want to do a class 2 peak. We'll keep it not too long. We'll say less than 12 miles round trip. We won't go with too much elevation gain, so we'll keep it under 4,000 feet. Maximum road difficulty, you know, can your Subaru make it to the trailhead? So we'll just say easy 4-wheel drive. You know, maybe you don't really like exposure, so we'll keep that moderate. And we're kind of, you know, we don't want too much. Ooh, that's not good. We don't want too much trouble route finding. And here's a list of mountains and routes that meet all of our criteria. So whatever we're comfortable with. And so this is really a fun tool to figure out, hey, where are places that I can go climb with my current skill set? And also a way to look at, okay, have I done a peak that's this hard yet? Or how does this peak compare to the other ones that I've started doing? And so as you climb more mountains, it's kind of fun to kind of keep track of where you are and kind of progress through your skill set. And that's really going to help you advance through the 14ers. Okay, so again, the article is available on 5280. I'll post it in the chat. Or, hey, Mary, can you post the 5280 link in the chat in a minute?
Actually, one of our illustrious attendees has done that for us.
Oh, excellent. Great. So if you're new to 14ers and you're looking to hike your first peak, these are some peaks that I recommend. I've talked about Bierstadt already. Grays and Torreys are also pretty close to Denver, within an hour away. Class 1 and Class 2. You can hike to the top of Grays and then drop down and gain 600 more feet and then go over to the summit of Torreys, and you can get 2 14ers in one day by doing 8.5 miles, 3,600 feet elevation gain. Quandary is out by Breckenridge. It's a good peak. Sherman's actually kind of the shortest elevation gain when you can drive all the way to the upper trailhead. You won't be able to do that for another month or two. Huron Peak is down in the Swatch. San Luis is in the San Juans. And then Democrat is down there. And then if you've done, you know, some class 2 and you want to get into a little bit of class 3, these are some of the class 3 peaks that I recommend as starters. The Sawtooth, which actually goes between Bierstadt and Mount Blue Sky, has a nice traverse. If you do Long's Peak, which is in Rocky Mountain National Park, the Keyhole route is a good class 3, and a couple other ones I mentioned, Wetterhorn, are good peaks as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what to bring on your hike. Actually, let's take a second and look at the poll questions. Back here. I'm going to pull up the polls real quick. So I asked, where are you joining us from this evening? We had 52 people. I'm sorry, we had 29 people take the poll. 56% of you, 29 of you are from Colorado. So welcome. We've got 13 people from the Midwest, 1 from the Northeast, 8 from the Southeast, 1 from North America, which I assume is Canada or Mexico, and nobody internationally. So welcome, everybody. We're glad you're joining us. Sounds like half of you are Colorado residents and the other half are probably going to be visiting sometime this summer. So looking forward to it. Thank you for tuning in and joining us. That's been one of the benefits of doing like an online talk is we picked up people from all over the country. So we're really glad you're here. The second question was, how many 14ers have you hiked? 24 people, 62% said 0, which is awesome. You're in the right place. 10 of you have said you've done less than 10 peaks. 3 of you have done between 10 and 30, and 1 person has done over 30. And then 1 person is a 14er finisher. And it's not me. So excellent. So that's exactly who we're targeting here with this this talk. So I'm really glad that you joined us. And I will jump back into the slides here. Sorry, Mary. All right, let's talk about what to bring. So we now, you've used the peak locator and you've kind of figured out like, okay, I've got some mountains I want to go climb. So what do I bring? How do I pack? What do I expect? So there's what's called the 10 essential systems. And this is in general for outdoors, spending time in the outdoors, navigation, sun protection, warm clothes, headlamp, flashlight, first aid supplies, fire, repair kit, nutrition, hydration, emergency shelter. So what that looks like on a 14er, this is kind of how I dress and what I bring. So it's important to dress in layers. Throughout the day, the temperature is going to fluctuate. It's going to be cold in the morning. It's going to warm up during the day. It might get cool in the afternoon or windy as you go higher, or if it gets overcast. So you want to have a good base layer and some long pants, and then a light jacket or a fleece, and then either have a shell or a rain jacket to put over it. Hiking boots are great. Tennis shoes are totally fine. As you spend more time hiking, you're probably going to want to invest in some hiking shoes or some hiking boots, but tennis shoes are perfectly acceptable, especially on the class 1 and class 2 hikes. You want to make sure that you have sunglasses and a hat. And then it's a good idea to bring like a ski cap and gloves. And so throughout the day, in the morning, you're probably going to start off wearing most of these layers. Then you're going to start hiking. You're going to get warmer. You're going to start taking off layers. Then you're going to get to the summit. You're going to sit down and start eating your lunch. It's going to be windy. You're going to put your jacket back on, etc. So all day you're going to keep adding layers and removing layers to stay comfortable. And then in your backpack, I recommend bringing 2 to 3 liters of water. That's going to depend on, how long your day is and how much you drink. But I pretty much always, I would say I never have less than 1.5 liters of water. And I'm usually closer to 2 to 3. Bring lots of food and snacks. Make sure that you have navigation. And the best thing is like the route description that I showed you. You can either print one off and take it with you, or you can download the 14ers.com app, and you can actually have the navigation on your phone. It's important to bring sunscreen because the sun is pretty brutal at 14,000 feet, and also a first aid kit. And if you don't want to go, buy a first aid kit, you can make your own. Just go into your medicine cabinet and just grab, all the things you might normally need, like ibuprofen, Tylenol, maybe some Benadryl, Imodium, Band-Aids, duct tape, etc. I bring a headlamp with me any time of day because they can be really helpful. They don't weigh much. And if you get caught after dark, it can help you get back to the car. If you get in an emergency situation, you can use it to signal for help in the dark. Having a headlamp at all times is just a really good idea. And then another thing is an emergency bivy. They sell these at REI or your local outdoor stores. What they are is they're kind of like a sleeping bag made out of like a space blanket. And so if someone gets injured, they fold down to about the size of your fist. They don't weigh anything. And if somebody gets injured, you can just pull this out. They can climb in there and it can kind of help them stay warm. And so what you want to think about is, if you do get into trouble, if you were to get lost or you had to spend the night, could you make it through an evening out in the elements. You know, if you put on all your clothes and you climbed in your emergency bivy, would you be okay? Would you have enough water and snacks to survive a situation? That's kind of what you want to be thinking about. You don't have to be comfortable, but you just want to make sure you can get through a bad situation. So, a couple keys to a safe and successful hike. You want to start early in the morning. And by early, I mean usually around 6 a.m. or earlier. And the reason is in the middle of the summer, we start getting thunderstorms just about every afternoon. And so if you start in the morning, usually the skies are clear, you can get your hike in. And then by the time those afternoon thunderstorms come rolling in, you want to be, back at the car and heading back to Denver and not be stuck up on the mountain. It's a good idea to take a break every hour and to eat and drink something. It's very tempting to say, "Oh, I'm feeling good. Let's keep going." And, "Oh, I'm feeling good." And then a couple hours go by and then all of a sudden you bonk. It really kind of catches up with you. And then you feel exhausted for the rest of the day. So a good rule of thumb is, eat before you feel hungry, drink before you get thirsty. Make sure you're staying hydrated along the way. Give yourself enough time. I showed you the elevation gain early on, and it's pretty good to estimate. If you're starting out, I'd estimate somewhere around gaining 700 feet an hour. Today, I hike at about 1,000 feet per hour. I know some people who go a little bit faster than that, but maybe the fastest people I know are around 1,200 feet per hour. So somewhere in there. So when we said Bierstadt was 2,800 feet, if you're your first time, I'd expect maybe 4 hours or so to get to the summit, and then probably 2.5 or 3 hours to come down from the summit, plus, however long you spend sitting on the summit, eating your lunch, etc. So you could be in for like a 6 to 8 hour day on doing a peak like Bierstadt. I mentioned eating and drinking, and then selecting good partners. And this is, when you're starting out, you may not know anybody, or you may just be meeting people online and going and hiking. And this becomes really even more important as you get into harder peaks. If you're doing class 1 and class 2 hikes, that's a good time to go out and meet people. But by the time you start doing class 3 and class 4, you want to have people that you trust, people that, care about you, will go at your pace, that you enjoy being with, and you can get along with. Okay, I mentioned the 14ers.com app. Bill is always doing additional work on the app. He's now, he's added route descriptions for every peak. And what you can do is, if you're going to be out of cell phone range before you get to the mountain, there's a button that you can say download all the photos. And so everything for the entire route description will be saved on your phone. There's also a navigation feature, so you can actually follow the route on the app up the mountain and see if you're off route, etc. Conditions reports, links to the weather are all included in the app. So it's really a great tool. It's free and it's available on your phone. And if you want to do a little bit more heavy duty mapping, there's a couple different applications. I like to use Gaia, which has a free app as well, and then also a pay add-on. And this is a good way. It shows you in-depth like topo maps, USGS maps, and if you're kind of nerdy and like me and really like getting into some of the mapping stuff, these are some other tools that I like to use. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about Leave No Trace. And I'm going to, Mary introduced me, so I will introduce Mary. Mary is one of the admins on the 14ers.com Facebook group, and she is also a peak steward with the Colorado 14er Initiative. And so Mary's going to talk to us a little bit about Leave No Trace.
Yes, I am. This is one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world. So, I'm going in my 7th year of volunteering for the Colorado 14ers Initiative. And for those of you who aren't aware of what this organization is, it's one of the largest outdoor nonprofits here in Colorado that helps care for the 14ers. So if you have already been on a 14er trail or you're planning on it, chances are you are crossing literal paths with work that we've done to build and maintain trails on many of the 14ers across the state of Colorado. And we work in partnership with the Forest Service to do all of that. So the one side of CFI is the trail maintenance, trail build side. The other side is the part that I'm part of, the peak steward side. So I'm a volunteer educator, and there's a nice crew of us, about 50 of us, that wander around the state educating people throughout the summer. So one of the critical things about CFI having an education component and being present for presentations like these is that not only are we interested in your safety, but we also want you to understand the environment that you're traveling into and the impacts that you can create, which leads to the ask for all of you to help us keep things wild out there and protected and pristine. I like to start with numbers because I think they're really compelling. Obviously, you know, there are 66 or so of you here right now. So you're a small subset of a much larger pool of very interested, invested hikers. In 2023, just across a four-month span, we tallied 260,000 hiker use days across the 14ers that we monitor for hiker use, and that's a lot of traffic. Two of those peaks, Mount Bierstadt and Quandary Peak, each saw 25,000 to 30,000 hikers. And again, that's just a 4-month time span. Mount Elbert, the tallest 14er in our state, is also very popular and saw 20 to 25,000 hikers across that 4-month time span. So, so when you think about it, kind of how I put it in my mind is, what would my own yard look like if that many people wandered through it? So it makes sense that we put trails through these areas so that we don't have 260,000 people just wandering, you know, whichever way up the mountain they think is ideal. So I just want to highlight some critical aspects that tie into our passion for Leave No Trace. One of the key things to know about the alpine environment is it is the harshest environment on the planet. And so I think sometimes people are surprised to learn how fragile it is, but that actually makes sense when you think about it environmentally. Everything that's there, the animals, the plants, they are built for that environment. They are built to withstand what they know to be their everyday existence. They are not designed to withstand impacts like us. And so it's important for us to understand what we do bring into this environment, and how we behave can really have significant impact if we allow it to. So just a couple of compelling things, I think, is it takes 5 footsteps to kill an alpine plant. So that is how fragile things are up there. And it takes 100 years for the alpine to form another inch of topsoil. So there's just that environment is always fighting different elements. It's just a very harsh place to be. So my first main point is about staying on trail. The picture that's on your far left is an example of people that haven't stayed on trail. And especially if you're going to get out there within the next month, or especially within the next month, you're going to encounter snow melt, which leads to mud. And you're just going to want to walk through the mud. So, you know, part of being a 14er hiker is sometimes you just have to get dirty out there and just embrace the fun of that, instead of trying to create, you know, new trail around something you don't want to walk through. So the trails really truly are intended to help us stay on the same path so that we're not creating new paths. Because once that's there, a lot of these places are not where everything has been, where vegetation has been fully eradicated. Those aren't going to recover within our lifetime. So, so it's something to stay really cognizant of as you travel in the alpine environment. And I like to say, if it's brown, sit on down. If it's green, keep it pristine. It's just a good rule of thumb to follow. Try and take your rest breaks on rocks, not on grass, that kind of thing, because it's not the same as the grass here in town. And the other thing is just waste in general, whether that's waste we're producing or whether that's things that we're bringing into the environment. If it's things that don't occur there naturally, then they don't belong there. And that's just the simple way of talking about disposal of waste properly, about leaving what you find and removing things that you've brought. You know, sometimes folks that bring bananas and orange peels, they think, you know, well, you can just leave those in that environment. But really try to think about, but does it belong here? Does it occur here naturally? If it doesn't, then you could be introducing something to the animals there, for example, that, you know, they'll be curious about, and then they ingest it and it's not good for their systems. So it's just important for us to consider what we leave behind from a waste perspective. And, you know, both, so alluding to the second picture on this slide, whether it's your own actual waste or it's your dogs, you know, we really just encourage everybody to pack everything out, no matter what it is. And there are products out there to help support that, to help contain that. Wag bags are great for human stuff, and doggy bags, of course, for dog stuff. So just explore those options as well. And I specifically want to mention Summit Signs because this is a trend in the community that I think is important to address. It does turn into a waste issue when people are bringing their Summit signs up there and leaving them. And often people do have good intent because they think somebody else will use it. But more often than not, we or others that we partner with end up pulling down piles of Summit signs because after you leave it, nobody feels responsible for it. So we love all love getting out there and having fun and enjoying these places, but it's also important that we do be mindful that we don't leave traces of ourselves behind. So have your fun, but bring your fun back out with you. And then lastly, it's been kind of a growing trend that people are bringing their dogs with them when they hike. And there are a couple of really important things to consider. I first and foremost want to mention the safety of your dogs. There's a lot to consider about bringing your dogs into those environments, but we also more and more are seeing impacts to wildlife, and there can be impacts to the tundra as well. So the fragile plant life up there. And so, you know, keep in mind, dogs are visitors to these environments just like we are. And so same concepts apply, you know, as far as not allowing them to chase after animals, not allowing them to leave traces of themselves behind. But also, so it's important to keep in mind, especially from a wildlife perspective, you know, you don't want, there's a mountain goat behind me. You don't want one of those chasing after your dog. So, you know, just for your dog's safety, keep them under control. But also, you know, animals up there don't have defenses against dogs because they don't know dogs. Dogs don't occur naturally in their environment. So it's important to just, you know, be good stewards out there and think about the fact that you and your furry friends are both visitors there. And while, you know, CFI and other folks that we partner with, we're doing as much as we can to help preserve things out there. It's really a community effort, you know, so I would invite you all to really explore where you're going. It's an extraordinary landscape and there's a lot to know about it, and it's very dynamic and interesting. And the more you get to know about it, I hope the more you appreciate your role as you're hiking out there in helping preserve the work, not only the work that we have done to help preserve things in the bigger picture, but that you also educate within your own circles and help spread the word and help make this more of a community effort out there. So just being a good guest where you roam is really what we'd like to encourage and invite you to do. And if you have any questions about leave no trace concepts or anything that I've talked about, feel free to put it in the chat or feel free to message me and I'd be happy to answer. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. keep going here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges of climbing 14ers. One of them is thin air. So here's a little graph. In Denver, we're at 5,280 feet above sea level. And, we have about 84% of the oxygen content that someone does sitting on a beach in Florida. When we go up to 14,000 feet to the top of Mount Elbert, that drops down to about 62%. So literally you're losing about a third of the oxygen that you would be getting if you were sitting on the beach somewhere in California. Now, compared to some of the other places in the world, like Everest Base Camp and Mount Everest, if you've ever read, John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, he talks about the death zone, and that's where there's like not a lot of oxygen. That's above 26,000 feet when the oxygen gets really low. So we have, significantly more oxygen in the air on top of a 14er compared to what's happening on some of the highest peaks in the world. But there is significantly less than when you're, sitting at home in Denver or maybe coming from someplace even lower. So what effect is that going to have on your body? You're out there exerting yourself, you're breathing in less oxygen. And so from time to time, you're going to feel the effects of mountain sickness. Acute mountain sickness is something that, everybody feels once in a while. It can be something like a mild headache or feeling a little lightheaded or maybe a little nauseous, or maybe your stomach just doesn't really feel like eating a whole lot. You kind of slow down a little bit mentally. You're not as sharp as you normally would be. And sometimes your muscles, you just feel kind of tired easier. And, this is something that you want to be aware of. If you're having these symptoms and they're mild, it's okay to keep going, but you want to keep an eye on them. If you start getting, a significant headache or dizziness or symptoms, you might want to think about going back down, because the higher you go, the more these symptoms are going to increase, and the lower you go, they usually subside. And so it's just something that you want to monitor every time you go out. If you are prone to altitude sickness and it is a problem, there are some prescription medications. I've not personally used any of them, but I know that people who go climb higher peaks will often get a prescription before they go. And I've heard of people coming to Colorado and taking some of these medications and it helping them. So if you're having problems with altitude sickness, there might be some other solutions for you. And this can affect people differently. It can even change over your life or at different points in your climbing. It may not be an issue early on, and it may bother you more as you spend more time in the mountains, or vice versa. Maybe something that's really not an issue as you kind of acclimate more. So something to be aware of. And then let's talk about what to do when things don't go well. Search and rescue. Every summer there's a ton of headlines. All of these came from one year, and they're things like Horizon 14er deaths reflects rise in climbers and fearless behavior. One after the other, 2 14er rescues on Monday. Blackhawk used to rescue 2 climbers stuck on a 14er overnight. And so, this is just happening constantly. And especially since, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, a lot more people went out to the mountains. A lot of those people weren't as prepared as others, and the number of rescues every year has kind of continued to increase. So there's always people getting into trouble. My goal is that you won't be one of those people, or if you do need help, I'm going to go through how to contact help and to get down off the mountain safely. And, this really hit home for me about a decade ago. I lost a close friend, Rob Jansen, who died in a climbing accident on Hagerman Peak, which is right near Snowmass Mountain. Rob got caught in a rock fall and fell and did not survive. And that really kind of changed my perspective on 14ers and really made me aware of the risk out there because, climbing 14ers is amazing. It keeps you in shape. It gets you excited, gets you outdoors, gives you something to look forward to, exposes you to a wonderful community. It adds so many benefits to your life. But when tragedy strikes, all of a sudden, all those great things can suddenly become very painful memories. And so, anyway, it's just important to remember that at the end of the day, the most important thing is that everybody just gets home safe. So let's talk about some of the risk factors that pose challenges. So I'm kind of breaking this out just over the summer. We have June, July, August, and September. And these are the different risks. So there's going to be snow in the mountains for about another month. And we'll talk about snow specifically in a minute. And then we're starting to get into our monsoon season. And this is a time in Colorado where it'll be nice in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, just about every single afternoon, thunderstorms will start to build up and we'll get some rain. And then the thunderstorms will kind of clear out. So we have monsoon season and the early part of the summer. And then August is often a really good time between monsoon season when the weather's still warm. Then when we get into late August, September, things like a new snowstorm, dropping an inch or so of snow, and colder weather are possible. Lightning is possible year round, but it's most prominent and the biggest danger during monsoon season, during the summer months, which we're coming up to. So lightning is going to be one of the biggest things you want to worry about. And then all year, regardless of when you go out, there's things about like getting off route, taking a fall, getting caught in a rock slide or rock fall, etc. And so let's talk a little bit about snow. This is the snow water equivalent graph for the state of Colorado. This green line here is what our snowpack average is. So this is the amount of snow that's in the mountains by the month. So every year, it starts snowing in November. We reach kind of our peak snowpack in about April. Then it starts to warm up. Then the snow starts to melt and our snow drops. Today, we are right here on this black line. And so we are actually a little bit below average for this time of year in the mountains. And this line is going to continue to drop. And you can see here that usually by July, it hits, the snow's all gone. So I would predict that there's probably going to be significant snow in the mountains for another 3 or 4 weeks, but it's probably going to melt pretty quick. And if we look at the map on the right, this is actually a breakdown by the different drainages of where there's a lot of snow. And so down in the southwest part of the state in the San Juans, they're actually, pretty far below average. And in the northern part of the state, they're closer to average. So in the top right here, this is a photo in the middle of June. This is June 17th on Mount Princeton. And this is just kind of a snow patch that's left over. And this is the trail that traverses across it. And so, this type of snow is, it's usually very firm. It'll freeze overnight. So it'll be very hard in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it'll get really soft and kind of slushy. And so a good thing to have if you're going to try to hike in the next couple weeks is to get micro spikes, which are these little chains that you put on your boots. And they basically kind of act as like a thrifty crampon, if you will, to kind of give you traction as you walk across the snow. And these work really well. And I recommend taking them, in the early season. And then once July hits, you're probably not going to need micro spikes at all. And once the snow melts, you can put them away until next year. So let's talk a little bit about weather. Understanding the weather and understanding the weather forecast is really important for a good hike. So back when I was showing you how to plan your hike, one of the links said NOAA weather forecast. And if you click on that, it will take you to a forecast kind of like this one. And so the first thing I want to look at is here on the right. This is Mount Blue Sky, which was formerly Mount Evans. And it shows you kind of where on the map this forecast is projected. And then it's important to look down here where it says point forecast elevation 13,110 feet. So sometimes the forecast will be, 12,000 feet, sometimes 13,000 feet. It's going to get a little bit colder as you go up. Usually every 1,000 feet changes by about 3 degrees. So kind of keep that in mind. Sometimes you're like, wow, it looks really warm. And then you realize they're forecasting for like 11,500 feet, etc. So we're at about 13,000 feet, which is kind of right in the middle of our hike going up Mount Bierstadt. This is kind of a typical summer forecast, the high at 13,000 feet. We'll just say today this was taken in the past, but, chance of thunderstorms, high of 56 degrees, then tonight, chance of thunderstorms, then Tuesday, mostly Sunny. So this is kind of, you get your forecast. And then when you look at the detailed forecast, it says showers and thunderstorms likely mainly between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m., increasing with a high near 56. Winds are going to be 7 to 10 miles an hour. Gust as high as 24. Chance of precipitation is 70%. So that's a pretty normal forecast. Rain's going to come in the afternoon. This is kind of typical monsoon season. And then you can click down on the 48-hour forecast, which I really like to take a look at. And this kind of breaks down of what's going to happen over the next couple days. So the red here is your temperature. We're going to see that temps are going to rise about 50 degrees at 8 a.m. The next one down is showing our winds. We have wind speeds and wind gusts, 10 mile an hour winds, 20 mile an hour gusts. That's a nice, fairly calm day. And then we look at the rain. So we can see that before 10 a.m., they're not forecasting any rain. And then the chance of rain goes up starting at 11 a.m. If we look at the next day, if we move to the right, we can see that the chance of rain starts at around noon. So given, the forecast on the left is, we'll say today, and the forecast on the right is tomorrow, you have a slightly larger window to get out and hike. And your goal is to get out before these rainstorms come in. So you want to get up early, you want to get to the summit, and then you want to get back down either to the tree line or to the car before, these thunderstorms come rolling in. So if you decided to hike on the day on the left, you could still go. You'd want to start pretty early. You probably want to start at like 5 or 4 a.m. because you want to try to be back at the car sometime around 10 a.m. If you go on the second day, you're going to have until noon, and you could probably do your 6 a.m. start, etc. And, the forecast, when we're looking at this forecast, when you're about a week out, you kind of start to get an idea about, oh, next weekend's going to look pretty good, or there might be some rain clouds. But it's not until you're about 2 or 3 days out that when that forecast really comes together with more certainty. So you kind of want to keep checking it until you're about 2 or 3 days out, and then you kind of have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Yeah, and so what's here in the highlight this is again kind of the windows when you would be hiking. On the left, you'd want to start a little bit earlier. On the right, you have a longer window. So let's talk about, what to look for in the sky. How do thunderstorms build? A lot of people go out and they hike, and then they get caught in a thunderstorm, and they say like, the clouds just came out of nowhere and this thunderstorm just came in and there was nothing we could do. And a lot of times, if you know what to look for, you can start to see thunderstorms building. And so in the morning on most summer days, you're going to have, clear skies. It's going to look like this, and you're going to be like, this is awesome. And then mid-morning, maybe around 9 or 10 a.m., you're going to start to see these kind of puffy white clouds start to form. These are not, don't represent trouble, or they're not going to cause anything right now, but they are showing that clouds are starting to form. And so you just kind of want to be aware of that. There's a big progression going from here, which means, hey, we're clear for a while, to, hey, clouds are starting to form. We want to keep an eye on them and see what happens, to this is what happens. So the clouds will keep building. You start to get these big thunder clouds, which are, pretty tall and pretty dark on the underside. And by the time you get to here, you want to be heading down the mountain. You don't want to be heading up with another hour or two to the summit when you start seeing this. So hopefully, on a perfect day, it might look like this all day. On most days, you'll start seeing this happening. And then by the time you get to here, you want to be already have tagged the summit and be heading back down and getting out of the way of this thunderstorm. So we talk about lightning. This is a graph that was put together by meteorologist Chris Tomer. This is when lightning flashes happen in Colorado throughout the year. So you can see beginning of the year, January, February, March, April, you're not going to get struck by lightning. Then starting in May, some thunderstorms. And then this is our kind of monsoon season here. Beginning in June, July, and August, we get a lot of lightning flashes across the state. And then again in September, October, as monsoon season starts to come to an end, lightning comes down. So this is probably your biggest challenge when you're out in the summer, is staying ahead of lightning. Here's a graph of time of day when lightning casualties have occurred. This is 263 people have died by lightning strikes. And again, if we look at the time here, very few are happening. I feel bad for these people because they were unlucky. Between, 7 and 9 a.m., you've had just 3 people, 10, 11. Then you get to noon and you just see noon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 p.m. This is when people are dying by lightning strikes. And so again, if you come out here and you hike in this window, you can avoid most of these bad situations. And so if you're really into weather, there's actually a lot of really cool websites. Chris Tomer is a local meteorologist here in Denver. He's a big 14er guy. And on his website, christomer.com, he puts together a video on most weekends, and he'll talk about what the weather forecast is across the state, specifically for going out hiking and climbing. So it's a really good site to follow. And then I also recommend the website mountainforecast.com, which is, if you really like geeking out on science and weather, they have a lot more weather information if you want to get into it. But as long as you know what the basic NOAA forecast is and you kind of understand when thunderstorms are coming, looking at the wind, temperatures, etc., you should be in pretty good shape. Another thing that we sadly have to talk about more and more is smoke. Last couple of years, we just keep getting more and more fires. And if Colorado doesn't have fires, somebody else in the West is going to have fires, whether it's Canada or Washington State or California. And a lot of their smoke gets caught in the jet stream and gets blown in. And so we can have a lot of smoke in the air. And so a couple websites that I like are airnow.gov, just shows smoke maps across the US. And then Weather Underground actually shows where fires are located and where that smoke is heading. And so that can help you plan your hike. This is a photo of Capitol Peak from 2020, which was the year from hell in so many ways. But in that year, Colorado had the 3 largest wildfires in state history, all happened that same summer in 2020. And this is, we went out and climbed Capitol Peak, and the sky was dark. I mean, this is not sunrise. This is like mid-morning, and there's just that much smoke in the air. So if there is smoke nearby, or you want to go out and hang out in the smoke, one thing that I recommend is a KN95 mask will actually filter out a lot of the particles in the air. And so if you do a lot of like exertion, or you spend a lot of time out in heavy smoke, you'll start to feel it in your lungs, and you can actually do some damage to your lungs. And so just if you're going to be out in some smoke, it's not a bad idea to throw in a KN95 mask in your bag. It doesn't weigh anything, and it can kind of help you breathe if the wind shifts and all of a sudden you're sucking in a lot of smoke from somewhere. Okay, so kind of wrapping things up, we talked about where to start, and maybe you really get in the 14ers, and maybe you want to go out and you want to climb them all. So, what's kind of a good progression? A good place to start is beginner, class 1, class 2 hikes. And when you start hiking those peaks, you're going to gain experience. You're going to learn basic trip planning. You're going to learn how to plan for the weather. You're going to learn how to watch the weather. You're going to learn how your body reacts to elevation. You're going to learn, how much water you need to drink, how fast you move, what foods work for you and what foods don't work for you. You're going to kind of learn how far you can go before you start to feel tired, what a long day is for you. And this is all stuff on, some of the easiest peaks, or the easier peaks, I should say, so that, if you get into trouble or the weather turns, you can still get off of them pretty quickly because they're class 1 and class 2 trails. Then as you start to develop some skills, as you start to learn more about yourself and gain some experience, then start moving into some of the intermediate peaks, some of the class 2 plus, the class 3s, and now you kind of get into some more trip planning. Some of these peaks have difficult route finding. You start getting into loose gullies and loose rocks. You can start doing some more technical climbing. Hopefully you're starting to find good partners by this time, and you can get into some long days. You might have some 12 or 14-hour days where you do Longs Peak or some of these longer hikes. And then kind of when you've gained a lot of these skills, then you can start looking at some of the hardest peaks, the class 4, because ultimately it's kind of a culmination of everything you've learned along the way. And so as you're learning, you're going to make some mistakes. And if you're on, some of the more beginner peaks, you'll be fine. But, when people really get themselves into trouble is when they go after these hardest peaks and they get into these advanced peaks and they haven't really developed the skill sets. They don't really understand the weather. They don't know how their body works. They don't have a lot of different experience with route finding. And then all of a sudden they're on one of the hardest peaks and they're being tested, with all these different areas, and then weather turns bad, and then they find themselves in a really bad situation. So if you kind of think of it this way and you follow this progression, you'll be in good shape and you'll have the skills you need by the time you get to those situations. If you do get into trouble, you can always, if you find a cell phone reception, which a lot of the peaks do have cell phone reception in different spots, you can call 911. You can also call the county sheriff. Search and rescue is always developed through the county sheriff. There are personal location beacons. There's a spot tracker. There's the Garmin InReach. I actually have one of the Garmin InReach minis. They cost, a couple $100, and then they kind of have like a cell phone plan where you pay $12, $15 a month. They can be really helpful. I know they're expensive, but the nice thing about them is you can send a text message from anywhere on the mountain. They have apps that connect to your phone, so you can just send texts. If you get into trouble, they have the SOS button that you can press, and it will alert search and rescue to come get you. And so these have been really great, and they're a really great way to keep in touch. If you have loved ones at home or family and people want to know where you're at, you can always be in communication. You can also set up like a tracking service. So there's a website certain people can go to and they can follow, where you are on the mountain if you want someone to keep an eye on you. So if you're able to afford one of these, they're really awesome, and they come in handy, and they're a nice thing to have. If you do get into trouble and you call search and rescue, there's a couple different ways you could be helped. The best option is if they can send in a helicopter. And they can do this in one out of two ways. They can send in a Flight for Life, often from Denver out to the mountains. Or if you're really fortunate, the Colorado Army National Guard has a group called the HATS, the High Altitude Aviation Training Sites. And they will, when they are available, go out and do rescues as part of their training missions. And the photo on the right is from a video on YouTube of a rescue off of one of the Maroon Bells. and this helicopter just comes in and touches down. This Black Hawk just touches down right on the edge of the peak. These guys in the orange vest are search and rescue, so they hiked up. Person, I think, had a broken leg, and they called, the helicopter in. So if that's able to happen, it's really great. Flight for Life is not able to land, in the places a Black Hawk helicopter can. So usually Flight for Life will come in to a valley and land as close as they can. And then search and rescue will try to carry you or help you get down to the helicopter. And if the weather's bad or it's super windy, they might not even be able to get a helicopter. And so search and rescue might have to hike in from the trailhead. And so I've had a lot of friends that have been involved in a rescue. I was actually part of a rescue 2 years ago on Claber Peak. We were out in the winter, and one of the people in the ski party broke her leg. And so we had to do a rescue, and it was super windy and snowy, and they couldn't get a helicopter there. So we actually had to wait for people to come in and be able to, pull her out to get out of that situation. So the one thing I'll say is it takes a lot longer than you expect and a heck of a lot longer than you want when something happens. So, if you get in trouble and you can hopefully get a phone call in, just know like it's going to be hours at best before someone comes to help you. So prepare for it, put on all your layers, prepare to be there for a long time, because it's not an easy escape. All right, one thing I recommend doing, especially if you spend a lot of time, if you hike solo or you're just going out with friends, is leave an itinerary and tell people where you're at, because there's a lot of stories about, oh, person goes for a hike, they go missing, nobody knows they're gone for a couple days. Then when they start to recognize they're gone, they don't know where to look. And then, days have gone by before anybody even realizes there's a problem. And that puts, that person in a really bad situation. So whenever you go out, it's important to have, kind of someone that you trust or a contact person, and just give them the basics, say when, on this day, we're going to go out and we're going to go hike Mount Bierstadt's West Slopes Standard Trail. Great. Now if you don't come back, they know where to look. They know to go to the trailhead. And if your car's there, they can start to search right away. And they know that it's only a couple hours to the summit, and they're going to go look for you. Who are you with? It's me and Mary and that weird guy, Ryan. What's the plan? We're going to start at 6 a.m. because Nick told me to on his talk. And we went to Guanella Pass, and, we're going to go to the summit. We're going to go back to the car, and we should be there. We should be back at the car by 2 p.m. And then, kind of this action item like, hey, if you haven't heard from me by 7 p.m. That evening, something is wrong, call the sheriff. And then the sheriff's going to go to the trailhead. They're going to look for your car. They're going to say, man, the car's still here. It's getting dark. They're out there, and they're going to start a search, and there's a good chance that you would be rescued that night instead of sitting out there for days and days and days. So this is just a really good thing to do. It can be just a text message. It can be an email. Someone who's hanging around for the weekend. Okay, so that's kind of the end of my talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 14er community, and then we'll wrap it up. So there are a lot of 14ers.com events, mostly happy hours. There's ones in Denver. We probably have like 3 or 4 a year. There's a couple in Boulder. The Colorado Springs group, which Mary's really involved in, has planned a lot of happy hours. And so this is a great place to show up, meet people off the website, ask questions, find climbing partners, and just hang out. It's really a fun group. We are going to be doing trail work. So this has actually changed. We're going to be on Mount Bierstadt in late June. So we have a group of people from the 14ers.com community that partner with the Colorado 14ers Initiative, who Mary volunteers with, and we go out and we build trails every year. So you guys are probably thinking about hiking and not building trails, but after you go out and you do a bunch of hiking, if you want to come back and help build some trails, come get involved with the Colorado 14er Initiative. We also have get-togethers every year. So in late September, we always have the fall gathering where probably about 50 to 60 people go camp together at a big campsite near Lake City. And then a lot of people will go hike 14ers. There's a number of 14ers in that area. And so this is really a good place to go meet people, to hang out, do some hikes. There's also an event around Halloween called the Winter Welcomer. So it's not winter time yet, but it's kind of like an introduction to winter. And people go hike Quandary Peak, usually at the end of October, right around Halloween. A lot of times people wear costumes. And this is like a great way if you want to get into winter climbing or you want to do a little bit of snow conditions. It's kind of meant as like a mentoring hike where there will be a number of experienced people there and you can kind of show up and get some advice and go on a hike. And this is really a lot of fun. And then we also in May, we didn't have one this year, but there is a spring gathering where we go somewhere in the Swatch Range and do a lot of like snow climbs and spring skiing and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ways to get involved if you're in Colorado and in Denver. They even had a 14ers.com Kansas City happy hour meetup once or twice. So if you live, in a neighboring state and there's a lot of 14er enthusiasts, feel free to get together and have your own. Lastly, I'd like to kind of promote some of our local outdoor shops. In today's environment, it's really easy to buy things online. But there are some really great mountaineering stores. I really like Bentgate is here in Golden. Neptune Mountaineering is up in Boulder. Mountain Chalet is down in Colorado Springs. And these are, places with knowledgeable staff that you can drop in, try on gear, get good information, and support your local outdoor store. So with that, I'm going to wrap everything up and we're going to move into our question and answer portion. I'm Nick Januchis. Feel free to send me a friend request on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. And I go by Mongoose on 14ers.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Great as always. And I have been monitoring the chat for some questions. We just have a couple coming in so far. So for those of you who don't see the chat, hopefully you have an icon on your screen that you can open up, but you're also welcome to take yourself off of mute to ask verbally, but I'll read out a couple that are in the chat so far. The first one is from, where was it? Miss Marina said, hey, great webinar so far. Question, are there any apps or sources that show snow conditions in real time? A live satellite view of some sort. I have a footpath app and I thought I can see snow on there, but I don't believe it is showing current conditions.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I'm trying to think of the name.
Does
of it.
OpenSnow offer that?
They might have a link to it. So if you do a search for Colorado snowpack, it will show you that graph and the basins, and that'll give you an idea. And then I used it last year when I was trying to get on the Colorado Trail early. There is this one website. It's not very commercialized, but you can get satellite imagery from like 5 days ago, and it will show you can see snow on the trail. And if I think of it or if I find it back in my notes, I'll throw it in the chat. But yes, there are some tools out there.
Great, thank you. And then how many people would you expect to encounter if you're hiking Grays and Torreys mid-July on Sunday or Monday?
On a weekday, mid-July, Sunday or Monday, I would guess somewhere between 50 to 100. I mean, you're the peak steward. You count people.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think Sunday is going to be right, 1 to 200. Monday is probably going to be pretty quiet. Yeah.
It'll be quieter. I mean, Saturday will
Quieter.
be
The
Sunday.
day.
You will not be alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Wendy, you have a question about lightning. You're welcome to take yourself off of mute. Yes. I know, technology. There
sorry.
we go. No,
So
you're
sorry.
fine.
So, I did have a situation. I thought we were safe. It was early June and lightning was on us. You feel the things in your head and it strikes close. Obviously, not, it was our mistake. Should have been down to tree line or lower. But at that point, when it's upon you, is there something to do other than just slide down the mountain to get to the tree line as fast as you can?
Yeah, not really. And I've
Okay.
been in that situation. I've never had a situation on the 14ers, but I finished the Colorado Trail last summer, and there's a section that is above tree line for, I think it's like a 15-mile section, and I got caught in a lightning storm, and it was absolutely terrifying. And you just want to get out of there as quick as you can, safely. I mean, obviously, you don't want to hurt yourself running down the mountain, but yeah, you're just kind of stuck there.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Nothing about getting on your toes and
well,
like,
there's been a lot of literature about, the zone, or what they call it, the cone of influence. And usually that's kind of like if there's trees nearby and they try to say, well, if you get this certain distance, but,
mm,
you're above tree line, so you're just kind of sitting there. So obviously trekking poles are metal and can be conductive. So you
mm,
might, drop your trekking poles if they're popping or buzzing, which can happen. And then, trying to keep a lower profile. I think they would probably advise you to kind of do a squat instead of laying on the ground. But I don't know. If it's a close hit, it's not really gonna matter what
okay.
to do. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Next, Solomon asks, should I also bring a helmet?
Yes, helmets are great for class 3. Um, some class 2, there's some really loose class 2 peaks where you might want to bring a helmet, like Mount Sneffels, but everything class 3 and class 4 helmets, I'd say highly recommended. If you got $100 head, bring $100 helmet.
I need to upgrade my helmet, I guess.
Do you have $100 head?
I think so.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer this if you want me to,
Yeah,
Daniela
go
from
ahead.
Wisconsin. She said, I've never hiked a 14er and live in Wisconsin. I'm looking for a group or other hikers to hike with. Are there organized Colorado hiking groups? And I welcome anybody else to chime in if there's something I don't know. I don't know of formal organized groups, but I would recommend joining the Colorado 14er ladies Facebook page, because some of the folks in there do organize little groups throughout the summer, which has been really great from what I hear. So I think that's one informal way to look for some hiking partners to go with, or small groups to go with. And I would also invite you to on 14ers.com, there's a part of the forum called Climbing Connection. You can leverage that to put basically an advertisement out there of, that you're wanting a hiking partner. I would put a couple of qualifiers in there for what kind of hiking partner you're looking for, but that can be a good way of gaining some contacts, as well as, if you participate in the .com Facebook page, that's also a good way to reach out and start making some contacts as well. Anything you would add to that, Nick, that I'm not aware
No, I
of?
think that's great.
Okay. Ryan and Rachel attempting first 14er out pikes via bar. How well marked is the trail above bar camp? I've actually not gone all the way myself.
What's your backyard?
I know,
Uh,
I've always done the other route. Andrew can probably answer that though, but I don't
yeah.
want to put him on the spot.
I was typing out a response to that question right now.
Okay.
So
Thank you. All right, answer forthcoming, Ryan and Rachel. I know, I always do the Craig's route on Pikes. And then, let's see, do we have have shuttle up there to take ride if we can't get down after reaching the summit? I assume you're probably asking about Pikes Peak. I think there is a private shuttle service, but you would have to reserve in advance. I don't know if Pikes has just a shuttle on standby. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Did find that website that has the satellite information.
Oh, thank you.
It's called
Oh, great. Yeah.
Copernicus browser.
Oh, cool.
I can share my screen real quick. So this is the website. It's called Copernicus browser, and it's actually like a European site, but they have different spectral imaging and satellite imaging at fairly high resolution. And so I'd play around with that. This kind of gave me, I was trying to figure out if certain trails were passable last year, and it kind of gave me a good indication of what's there with data within, the last, I think it's like 3 to 5 days ago. So check that out.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. When beginning at the trailhead well before dawn, have either of you had encounters with wildlife?
I have not seen any bears or mountain lions.
Yep.
Seen a lot of marmots and pikas, and there are, there's a lot of questions about one of the topics is like bear spray, or some people love their firearms. You don't really need those on the trail. If you're camping, those are good things that you might have for protection. Usually bear problems occur when you're camping or if you're worried about other people. But once you're kind of on the route, I'm not familiar with anybody having wildlife encounters with a bear or a mountain lion or anything like that. So your biggest problems are rocks and lightning, and those, bear spray is not going to do much for you in those situations.
I haven't had any encounters either. I think it's pretty rare. I've seen some glowing eyes, but I know they're deer. They just look at you.
I guess I will mention that mountain goats on some of the harder peaks, mountain goats will kick
Oh.
rocks down on you. And I think
Yeah.
they do it on purpose. It's kind of a defense mechanism, but I've actually seen them like shuffle their feet and send some rocks. So just be aware of that. If there's mountain goats above you, they're not going to charge you or do anything. But if they're above you, they can be clumsy. I think they're kind of evil personally, but maybe they're just clumsy, but they do knock rocks down sometimes.
That's a good one. This is a really good question because it's a pretty hot topic right now. Can you address using iPhone satellite messaging as an alternative to the Garmin InReach?
Good question. I do not have an iPhone. I've heard good things about them, but I don't know where they're at. Andrew, do you have an iPhone, or Mary, do you have an iPhone?
I don't, but I've talked to a couple search and rescue people about this topic. And yeah. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
No, I have, but it's not, I think it's only with the 15 or newer.
Yeah, like 14 or 15.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't used it for satellite communication.
Yeah. I think there are some drawbacks to it from what I was told. One of the big ones is that your emergency contacts will be notified that you have had an emergency, but they'll be given no context. And so that's something to think about with with regard to how much you want your loved ones to panic or not. So there's not an effective, like a highly effective two-way option at the moment. So, and also if your phone breaks, which they're more likely to do than an actual satellite communicator, that's something to consider as well. So I think, I think when you're starting out, it's great that that option is there, but my personal opinion would be if you think you're going to continue doing 14ers or being in the backcountry, investing in some kind of like dedicated satellite device is going to be a better way to go, at least for now. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
And I think, 5 years from now, our cell phones might be totally sufficient, but the technology is kind of coming up and they're good. It's a lot better than nothing, but probably not as good as an inReach.
Yeah. Can we camp around the trail the night before? Another good question.
Yeah, I'll let you answer it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there, if the trailhead is sitting on within the bounds of national forest or BLM land, generally it is okay to car camp around the trailhead. When it comes to tent camping, I think I would caution you to look up if there are any restrictions specific to that area, because there are certain areas where tent camping is going to be restricted just from a wear and tear perspective around a trailhead. So looking for an established campground in those situations is going to be more ideal probably. But it is quite popular and quite easy, I would say, in most circumstances, 14er wise, to be able to camp near or around a trailhead. But do a little bit of homework beforehand.
Yeah. And that's really a fun thing to do. Especially like a lot of the peaks in the Swatch Range or down in the San Juans have really kind of extensive roads and camping areas, and it's really nice. If a lot of people sleep in their car at the trailhead or will drop a tent at the trailhead, and the only problem with doing that is that you don't know who's going to be coming and going at different hours of the night, so you might not sleep as well. And then the other option is some people will kind of backpack in maybe a mile or two and then just, camp along, set up camp for the night, wake up in the morning, hike, and then come back, pick up their camp and come out. And if you want kind of more solitude and time in the woods, then that's a nice option as well.
Thank you. First hike coming in July, Gray's Tories. What kind of shape should I be in? Fairly fit, some walking and strength training and yoga, but should I be hitting hills harder?
So the first thing I'd ask is, where do you live? If you're living in Colorado, then you already have some acclimation. If you're coming from sea level, you're going to feel it more. But I would just say that, give yourself plenty of time and just get out and see how it goes. I think you'll likely make it without, any problems. But, if you get really winded or you feel tired, then don't be afraid to turn around. Sometimes you just don't really know until you go. And if you get out there and you get halfway up the mountain and you feel exhausted, then you know what you need to do next time. But I think most people, especially the people who kind of like attend this talk, are very cautious and preparing, and they're like, can I do it? And usually they find that when they get out there, that they have the strengths to do it. So good luck, and send us some pictures. My favorite thing is when people come to this talk and then go hike their first 14er and send some photos. So yeah, give it a shot.
Another really good question here. Who pays for a search and rescue? And is there something like a membership you can get to decrease the cost should you need it?
Yeah. Do you want to answer that one?
Sure. So search and rescue in Colorado is always free, but I want to emphasize that that is just the rescue portion. The instant that you need medical transport, whether that's by chopper, such as Flight for Life, or whether that's ground ambulance, that is where your costs will begin. So, so it's kind of situation dependent, but there are a couple of things that you can look into. First, I would recommend seeing if you have just normal insurance coverage, I would talk to your carrier and see what's covered from that perspective. I know that my carrier does offer coverage for this kind of transport, so I haven't had to worry about getting something supplementary. But I know through, I want to say it's the American Alpine Club, that you can get some kind of rescue, or they call it rescue membership, but it's really for that medical portion. But also, if you have a Garmin device, Garmin does offer an annual plan. They offer 3 different levels, and there are 2 levels that are really appropriate to what we're doing outdoors here. And so within that membership would also be coverage for the ambulance transport, again, whether that's helicopter or ground ambulance. So that's really the specific piece that you'd need to dial in, is coverage for the medical transport portion.
It's a really good deal. I think it's something like $30 or $35 for 100,000 in coverage.
Yeah, it is.
Couple other
Let's
things I'll add is if you have a Colorado hunting or fishing license, there is a 25-cent search and rescue charge on there, and that goes to a fund that can help. They kind of get frustrated because it always goes to hikers and never fishermen or really hunters very often. And then there's also a Corsair card, which I'll place in the chat here. And these are good. I think they're good for 5 years. And so basically what this is you buy, you can purchase 1 year for $5 or 5 years for 20. And so what it is there's a fund in the state of Colorado. You buy the card, you throw your $5 in, and then when, medical emergencies happen, they start pulling money out of that fund. So it doesn't guarantee you insurance, but it can give you some protection. But the goal of it is, they don't want a situation where there's been people who have been lost or, kind of hurt, maybe a sprained ankle or something minor, and they need help, but they're afraid that it's going to cost a lot of money and they don't want to make a phone call. And then they end up getting stuck out there. And then they go from like a minor situation to a very serious situation. And so, there's a lot of interest in keeping the cost free so that people will call for help and not get themselves in worse situations.
It's Nick. And are there some 14ers I need to register before in advance? I think, is Culebra the only one?
Culebra is the one that's privately owned.
Yeah.
They have a website. You can just Google Culebra Peak, and you have to register in advance. And the down in the Elks, like the Maroon Bells, if you want to stay overnight, you have to get like a permit to park in the parking lot. There's other options where you can stay in town and take a shuttle in. If you just do a day trip, I think you're okay. So just know that, like, for some of the harder peaks, the Maroon Bells, Pyramid, Capitol, Snowmass, there is some kind of parking permits, and Bill kind of gives an update on the website. They kind of change a little bit every year, but for pretty much every other peak, I mean, you can just drive up and hike. A couple of the other peaks you need to sign like a waiver, like Mount Lindsay has a waiver, and Democrat, Lincoln, Cameron, and Bross are asking people to sign a waiver just so that the little bit of the trail that goes over private land, you're just saying that if you trip and hurt yourself, you fall and hurt yourself, that the landowner is not going to be held. You're not going to sue anybody. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
I think Quangery is still kind of a standout just because it's still paid parking only at the trailhead. And then, but the alternative is you can park in town and take the shuttle. But I think they added a fee to that as well. It's like $10 or something.
That's a good point.
But other than that, I think that covers it. Yeah. Let's see, what else? Do you recommend starting altitude sickness meds like Diamox a couple of days before the hike if someone is coming from sea level?
Good question. I'm not sure because I haven't used them, but I would do whatever
Yeah.
your doctor recommends. So I don't know if they recommend taking it when you get at elevation or if they like prep you up, but I'd say your prescribing doctor would probably know, or a quick, I can Google that too.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Do the oxygen canisters help if needed?
Well, I don't really, let me say, I don't really know. I think I would say not really, for the most part. I don't know any hikers who take them or use them. I do think like in an emergency situation, like if search and rescue showed up, they might put you on oxygen, but the little canisters, I don't think provide a lot of help. And the other thing is like, if you're going into a situation where you need a little extra oxygen to get into that situation, maybe you shouldn't be going into that situation. So I think generally I've never used one. Um, I don't really know anybody who uses them. They're kind of viewed as more of like a something to sell to tourists when they come visit for the summer. Have you ever used Mary or Tim? Have you guys ever? You don't have to
I
admit to
have.
it on camera, but
I haven't. I have been told by clinical resources that it's really just a steady stream of oxygen that's going to truly help you. So I suspect the canned oxygens are more of a placebo effect. You might think you're breathing better, but
well, that would be helpful. I mean, we'll take a placebo effect too if that
yeah.
helps.
I'd probably not really waste my money on it personally. All right, let me see if there's anything else that's come in. Oh, Anonymous Pica posted a link
Yeah,
to
let's see what they say.
an article about it. Nice. Anonymous
Yeah.
Pica, who's not anonymous at all to a couple of us. Thank you.
The article says there's not good evidence that adding more oxygen onto normal levels of oxygen helps the body physiologically. When providers put someone with low levels on oxygen, it generally takes 2 or 3 minutes of a continuous flow before they see a change in the patient's levels. So just 1 or 2 breaths from a can would not anticipate would oxygenate enough blood that's going through the lungs to actually create a meaningful impact. There we go. Because I just kind of feel like if it worked, people would be doing it.
Mhm.
You know, if I'm hiking slow and someone's flying up the mountain and they're like, "Hey, I got oxygen," I think all of a sudden everybody would be going out and buying cans. Well, thank you, Anonymous Pica.
All right. Any questions anybody wants to ask verbally? Now would be a good time to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we don't have any more
You're welcome.
questions in the chat.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody
Okay.
coming. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us for questions. And
Thank you,
if
Nick.
you have, like I said, if you have other questions, feel free to shoot me a message on social media. I'll do my best to answer and help you out. And share pics if you get out and do your first 14er. Send some pictures of us. We'd love to see you guys. And come hang out at a 14er happy hour. That's it.
Indeed. Oh, real quick, yes, there will be a recording of this. And I don't, Nick, sorry, I already forgot what you said earlier about timeline.